Hi Arnaud, thank you so much for joining me today at the Smart Lab Exchange. Could you start off by telling me a little bit about your role and responsibilities at Pfizer?
My role currently is global system owner for a LIMS application that we have across our pharmaceutical sciences division. I'm cited in the Analytical Research and Development Organization, but try to span across as many organizations as possible to actually touch the LIMS application, from the quality organization, but also the inventory management groups, from the samples originations. But also I take active role into the wider lab informatics role across the science and technology lines that we have across pharmaceutical sciences at Pfizer.
What would you say are the major challenges you're currently facing in your role as the global head of LIMS?
Probably a couple of them. The first one is acceptance of LIMS beyond the QA/QC group. Historically, LIMS has been very much of a QC organization. You have a product, you do the testing, you record your data, you report, you have a C of A, and that's very much summarizing it to a very sort of almost silly level. So this is definitely an important challenge, acceptance beyond the QC group. What's very important is the fact that LIMS is really there to also help you structure your data in a much more facile fashion than other systems can do. So that's one interesting challenge that we have. The other one is very much about how do we provide access on demand to data from within our LIMS. And this is something that becomes more and more difficult to achieve, not so much because of the complexity, but certainly some system limitations that we have that don't necessarily always allow us to provide that sort of on-demand, one-click access to the data that we have. Although that's what we're trying to change. It is a medium-term goal to try and achieve that.
And Arnaud, at this year's exchange, you will be one of the expert panelists discussing the best strategies for aligning enterprise laboratory systems. Why is it still so hard for companies in 2016 to harmonise the ELNs with their LIMS?
I will probably paraphrase one of the earlier presentations we had today from Labware, I think, Mark Gonzalez, who used this lovely phrase that I really like to use extensively. A LIMS or an ELN is like having a hammer, and when you have a hammer in your hand, everything starts to look like nails. So when you have a LIMS or an ELN, you're trying to force fit a lot of different activities, a lot of different workflows into either of these systems. So that's a big challenge. Now, how do you change that? One relatively simple yet difficult to achieve is to have a very clear demarcation of what a LIMS and what an ELN can do with respect to other enterprise applications that we have. So this is a big challenge in terms of alignment. What do we need to align on? Where is the limit between what a LIMS does, the limit between what an ELN does, in relation to all the other applications that we may have. So that's certainly, in my view at this point, a reason why it's getting difficult to perform some of these integration activities.
What can companies such as Pfizer be doing strategically to ensure they're streamlining their various tools, systems and software?
One of the, again referring back to a presentation we had earlier in the day, one of the important developments that we are seeing more and more is the arrival of semantic data. So we had Ostus and Eric Little talking a lot about semantic technologies, and this is something that actually gives us an opportunity to develop and access a lot more of the data, give much more insight into what we already have beyond what we could ever imagine. We have run pilots and we already have a product internally that allow us to access data from very different data sources. And this very much gives us an understanding and an ability to draw through our project, our materials, all the way from a very early stage in our research all the way to final results for a batch of clinical material, for instance. So this is something that that becomes more and more important, and I can definitely see that evolving over the next few years, especially as we have a lot of activities going on right now with determining new standards, and the Allotrope Foundation is certainly a good example of that, where data standards become very important.
And after hearing from solution providers at this year's exchange, how has this changed your view of the lab informatics landscape?
I guess my views haven't necessarily changed a great deal. I'm actually very happy to see a number of vendors are embracing changes, are embracing technologies like semantic technologies to actually provide more insight into our data. It was very interesting to hear a number of companies and colleagues talking about the value of data. The data is key. The data is very important, but also the interpretation and the insight you get from your data becomes essentially what we need to focus on. The data becomes our currency in many respects, and we need to be able to manage it. We need to be able to extract as much value as possible from it. But in order to do that, we need to have a very sort of clear structure of our various different enterprise applications, and that's certainly something that we are working on. But it's also something that I'm sure many vendors will be keen to capitalize on over the next few years.
And finally, how do you see laboratory informatics evolving generally in the next few years, and what will this mean for your company?
So lab informatics is constantly evolving. The main change, I think I mentioned a moment ago, semantic technology is becoming more and more important. Finding relationships between our data, understanding the impact of a particular point in our data set in relation to other factors. We don't know what we don't know, and this is a very interesting place to be. Everyone talks about computerized modeling. Everybody talks about digital design. This can only be possible once you have good data sets that are clearly described with terms that are unequivocal. And this is really where, again, the Allotrope Foundation becomes very important, because you have structured taxonomies that really allow us to start working nicely with different types of data sets.